Now, for this week's episode, we decided we'd do something a little bit different from previous weeks. We've done away with the main discussion because we don't want to give you guys something that's merely good. We don't want to give you something that's frankly not bad either. You guys deserve the best. So without any further, Luke and myself are delighted. We are honoured to say that tonight we are joined by the legend, and I mean that is Ahmed Best. Ahmed, how on earth are you, mate?
Hello, I'm good. I'm really good. Thank you, guys. How are you?
Thank you so much for joining us, Ahmed. I know we had to figure out some time difference stuff, some time travel stuff, but we're here and we are ready to talk about your legendary, and I mean that, the legendary status of being able to have been Jar Jar Binks himself. Like I'm like, I can't believe it. I'm talking to Jar Jar. This is crazy.
That was me. Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think you should set your expectations a little bit higher, but I appreciate that.
You take that back.
I appreciate it.
No, we're so excited to have you on, mate. We really appreciate it. And the first thing we've got to say is in this strange world we're living in currently, we hope you're keeping well. We hope you're staying safe, mate.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I'm definitely staying safe. I am taking every precaution. I am social distancing. I am self-isolating with my family, of course. But it's definitely, health first, people first, community first. And that's best served by staying put, by staying at home.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, from Jar Jar Binks himself, everyone. So we gotta heed that advice.
Please do.
But we got some time here for some pure escapism, man. And you are an icon in the Star Wars community, in the Star Wars lore, right? So if you don't mind, Matty boy, I reckon let's dive into it. What do you think?
Do you know what? I think it's a really good idea, mate.
Let's smash it, mate. Let's smash it. So Ahmed, right? For our listeners who don't know, how did you get the role of Jar Jar Binks in the first place? How did it happen?
I was doing a show called Stomp, which is actually a show that originated in the UK. It's from Brighton.
Yes.
And I was on tour doing Stomp in San Francisco. And I was the lead of the show. But that night, ironically enough, and I talk about this in the one-man show because it was really kind of serendipitous what happened. One of my castmates got really sick. And so I had to play a role that I hadn't played in about 8 months. And I wasn't very happy about it as well, because when you're a lead of a show, the entire cast around you kind of fits towards you. Mm-hmm. So it was very difficult for me to play this other role because it throws off the entire cast, right? But another guy came in from New York, and he was from San Francisco, and that's where we were in San Francisco, if I hadn't mentioned that before. But he was from San Francisco, and he wanted to lead the show, and he had seniority over me. And so I had to be relegated to the back of the back line of the show, which did not make me happy at all.
I bet.
And because at the time I was like 22, 23 years old, and I was a bit of a hothead at the time, I decided to do a show that pretty much made sure that nobody was going to look at that guy and everybody was going to look at me. And Stomp was the kind of show where, I'm a drummer, and it's a very percussion heavy show. And the guy who came up was not as good of a drummer as I was. So I just destroyed it, and that was my goal, was to just completely blast him off the stage. And I did, right? But by the same time, like, I was just doing the most. I was just extra. I was doing like backflips, and I took my shirt off and I was throwing it into the crowd. And then at the end of the show, I kind of felt bad because Stomp was really about it's very much an ensemble show.
Mhm.
So I made the show like about me rather than making the show about the group, the 8 people working together. So I was on my way back to the hotel in just a terrible mood and just embarrassed because I felt like I embarrassed myself. And I get a call, and the call is from Robin Gurlin, who casted episodes 1 and 2. And she called me and she was like, "Can you come to Skywalker Ranch and
Wow.
audition?" And I was like, "What? For what?" She was like, "I saw your show. I really loved it. And I really would love you to audition for Star Wars." I was like,
Wow.
"What?" And I had no idea that, I mean, I knew people were thinking about doing another Star Wars movie. And like every fan, I was just like, "Oh man, I can't wait again." But I never thought that it was going to come my way, you know? And so it was kind of surreal. Like my audition was at Skywalker Ranch, and I was just like, "This is crazy." But not just, auditioning for this movie, but I am at Skywalker Ranch right now. Like for me, that was more than enough.
Mm.
Even if I never got the role, I was just like, "I'm here." And as I was walking through, she gave me a tour. Robin gave me a tour of
Nice.
Skywalker, and as I was walking through, I see like the Indiana Jones hat and the whip, and then I see Alec Guinness's original lightsaber, and I'm just like, "What is going on right now? This is just bananas! Like this is just absolutely insane. What's happening right now?" And then we go to Robin's little office and audition. And, the audition was crazy because she was like, "I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can't tell you who you're auditioning for." And I was like, "Well, is there a script?" And she was like, "There's no script. And even if there was, I can't give you any lines from the script." And I was like, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" Yeah. And she was like, "All right, I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios." And then the scenario she gave me ended up being like the first scene of Phantom Menace, which was like me jumping on Liam.
Mhm.
So I do that, not knowing what the hell that is. And then I go back out on tour, you know? And I'm just like, "Oh, well, that was fun. It was crazy." And they make you sign all these kind of NDAs. So I couldn't tell anybody about it. So 2 weeks later, I'm in DC on tour with Stomp, and I get a phone call, and it's Robin, and she was like, "Can you come back to San Fran for a screen test?"
Nice.
And I was like, "Word." So I'm gonna go back to San Francisco for a screen test. So I get time off, fly back, and I'm at Skywalker, just chilling. And then she's like, "All right, we're gonna go to ILM tomorrow and do the screen test." And I was like, "ILM, that's bananas." And ILM is just kind of legendary, right?
Yeah,
Anybody
yeah.
that
Mm.
loves music is just like, we all want to go to ILM. So I'm driving around to find ILM, and the old ILM is now in the Presidio in San Francisco now. It's very easy to find, right? The old ILM was impossible to find. It looked like a fake movie set, right? And that's what they wanted. They wanted people to be able to drive through ILM and have no idea that that's what you were driving through.
Mhm.
So it looked like this strip mall filled with like weird fast food restaurants that I'd never heard of, right? And so I'm driving around and I'm just like, and I call Robin, this was kind of pre cell phones. So I stop at a phone and I'm just like, "Hey, Robin, like, I don't know where I am. I'm driving through this strip mall that's like abandoned." And she was like, "No, no, that's it. That's ILM." And I was like, like nobody could give me the heads up about this? Like, I don't know. So I'm driving around and then I see Rob Coleman, who's the head of animation, who is like the other half of Jar Jar. I
Nice.
see Rob Coleman and a lot of the animation team, and they're standing outside and they're like flagging me down. They're waving me, and we're right here, right? And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I go to I park the car, and it's straight up like, Get Smart. You walk in through this like weird restaurant, and then you go in the back, and then it's the Energizer Bunny, Han Solo frozen in carbonite, like
No.
all of these things. Like you wish, as soon as you walk through the back of this thing, it's like smack, you're in the middle of ILM.
Wow.
So I was like, what is going on? This is some weird, like James Bond type of stuff. So I get to this huge like hangar for the screen test, and I walk in, and this is the first time anybody was doing a mocap main character in a movie.
Yeah.
So everybody was trying to figure it out. Nobody really knew what was going on. Everything was really experimental, question mark. And my screen test was really the time where people were just like, can we actually do this, or is this going to be just a superfluous exercise, right? So they take me in the back, and they give me the mocap suit, which everybody knows right now. But at the time, it's this like cat suit with a bunch of like ping pong balls over it. They're like 6-inch platform heels, because Jar Jar is taller than me, with ping pong ball, and a headband with ping pong balls on it. And I'm just like, what is this? And they go, put this on, right? So I put it on, and I look like I'm some kind of, weird trans exercise leader, right? So I walk into the space, and I'm just like, okay, just tell me what to do. And they're like, all right, we have to wait for George.
No.
I had not met George before. Right?
Wow.
And you're meeting him dressed like this.
So exactly. This is the first time I am meeting George Lucas, and I'm looking like I'm ready to go to the gay bar. So I'm just really, really nervous.
So it's great, really.
Embarrassed, excited. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is just so weird. And the other thing is like, nobody's telling me what's going on. Like, nobody's saying anything to me. I'm just like looking around going, what's about to happen? What's going on? So George walks in, and he's super unassuming. And, he's dressed like the icon, you know what I'm saying? He's got the flannel joint on, the beard, the trainers, the jeans, and he's really kind of quiet. So he goes, hey, how you doing? I'm like, hey, Mr. Lucas, really nice to meet you. And he's like, oh, okay, good. And then I'm just like,
oh yeah, that's good.
All right. He's like, yeah, okay, good. Just walk up and down through the space. Now, when I did the audition in Robin's office at Skywalker, I was walking kind of like low to the ground like a salamander, right? And so I was like, okay, should I do that? Should I walk low to the ground like a salamander? And he was like, no, just stand up and like kind of walk, kind of loose, kind of loping, long arms, kind of slow. And I was like, okay, cool. So I did that. Right? He was like, okay, cool. And I was like, anything else? And he was just like, yeah, kind of walk fast, kind of walk slow. And he was like, okay, now do whatever you want. And I was like, all right. So I started doing, there's a Brazilian martial art called capoeira, and I used to be really into capoeira. So I started doing a lot of capoeira. I did some cartwheels, I did some backflips, I did all of this kind of stuff, right? And so I'm done. I was like, okay, how was that? And he goes, okay, thanks, and leaves.
Wow.
Was it the cat suit?
And I was like, what is this? Like, did I? And then Rob comes over to me, and he's like, oh man, you did really well. And I was like, really? Because I don't know, He was like, no, that was really good. And then he goes, come and check this out. So I go on the other side, and there's this wall of computer monitors. And at the time, computer monitors were like 6 feet deep. They weren't like these flat screens, right? So I was looking at these monitors, and I see my skeleton in the computer moving like me, but it's just like this, it's called a point cloud, right? But It's just like all the ping pong balls, but it just moves like me. And then they put, characters over the point cloud. And I was like, how is this happening? So they point at all the cameras that were around the room, and they're like, the cameras are infrared. They're shooting film, infrared film,
Mm-hmm.
and it's picking up the ping pong balls and then turning that into information and putting it in the computer. And they're like, before you walked in here, we didn't even know this could happen. We didn't know this was going to be possible.
Wow.
Like now we know it's possible and we can do it. And I was just like, well, this is cool. And they were just like, all right, cool. So I go back out on tour. And I'm just like, if this is all that comes of this, this was fantastic, right? I had such a great time. I got to meet George. I got to meet a bunch of cool, like nerdy animation dudes. I'm good. I get a phone call. I'm in Philly, right? We're in Philadelphia. So I get a phone call and they're like, do you want to come out? And they asked me. I was like I really need to be asked. They're like, we would like to cast you in Star Wars. Would you like to do it? And I was just like, yeah.
Yeah, straight up.
I was like, they're like, all right, come to England in a month or two and you'll be in the movie. And then the rest was that. So that's how I got it.
Imagine getting that call to say, oh, by the way, do you want to stop what you're doing and just be in the Star Wars, the most anticipated film of all time, The Phantom Menace? Do you fancy being in it? Mate, the story itself was making me excited because as if I didn't know the ending of it. But so you get the gig and you're in London. What's it like? Well, actually, firstly, when did you find out the actual visual look of Jar Jar, and when you actually walked out on set for the first time? How was that?
I found out as soon as I signed all the contracts, and they had, they had me locked in, promised if I said anything, they would take my firstborn and the whole thing. As soon as I did all of that, they were just like, okay, we can finally show you something. So I went to England for a fitting because they had to make a cast of my whole body so they can start building the costume around it. So I went in for the cast and I finally saw the character and I was like, oh wow, there he is. They're like, this is what he looks like. And I was like, oh, they're cool. And I was like, do I get a script? And I read the script and it had all the Misas and the Usas and all of that stuff. And I was just like, what is happening? Like, what's going on? Right. And that's when I finally got kind of the gist of everything that was going on. But I wasn't cast as the voice yet. Like I was just the physicality. And so the first table read was scheduled like a week after my first fitting. And I was just like, should I come? Like, I don't know. And, again, I called Robin and I was just like, Robin, who's doing the voice? And she was like, George doesn't know. And I was like, well, I do voices. Can I audition for the voice too? And she was like, yes, please. Because she was having a hard time. And George was having a hard time kind of picking what the right voice was. So I did like 6 different voices and gave it to George. And then the table read was coming, right? And I was just like, well, Robin, like George didn't tell me which voice he liked. And she was just like, I'll just pick one. It's like, you guys are leaving too much up to me. You know what I'm saying? So we get to the table read and I am sweating because, Natalie's there. It's the first time I met Natalie, first time I met Ewan and Liam. Everybody's on the table read. Little Jake is there. And I'm just like, what am I doing here? Like, what's going on? All these people have careers and stuff. And I'm just this kid from the Bronx who could do a backflip in 6-inch heels and a catsuit. Like, why am I here?
Natalie Portman can't do that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, she's quite talented, Natalie. She might be able to.
Probably can't.
No, Natalie's a trained dancer. She can probably do all that stuff.
Yeah, good point.
But we get to the table read, and Jar Jar comes pretty quick in the movie. They do the Nemoidian thing. They fight off a bunch of battle droids, and at a table read, that takes 20 seconds. They're like, they do the Nemoidian thing, and they're just like, and the Jedi's fight, and now we're on that boat. And I'm like, oh, I got to talk now. And so, the first line of the movie happens, and I do it, and then I do the rest of the movie with the voice that eventually was Jar Jar's voice. And
Wow.
like after the table read, George was like, "Yeah, that's it. Do that." I
No
said, "Okay,
way.
great. We're cool."
That is surreal. And when you were doing the voice, what made you choose that? Why did you end up with that?
That was the voice that I used with like my little cousins and little kids every time I would try to make them laugh. And because Jar Jar was a kid's character, I kind of leaned that way.
Mm.
So George really liked it. Like George is really big on children. He loves kids, and his main focus was always to get kids to love the movie. And he would always say, like, once you get the kids, you'll have fans for the rest of their lives. And
Which is true.
He's right. So he was really big on Jar Jar being a big part of Phantom Menace, just to get the kids in there.
Wow. Wow. And it worked because, people like myself, I grew up, I was born in the mid 90s. I grew up in the late 90s and early noughties. And for me, Jar Jar Binks was a part of my childhood. Darth Maul was a part of my childhood. Qui-Gon was a part of my childhood. Yeah. All these characters from episode 1. My brother and I would sit on our PlayStation when it was just called the PlayStation. So the PS1 at the time, right? Playing like these characters, the character you betrayed was in that. And to me, that was normal in that galaxy, in that story, in that universe, it was normal. So how his voice sounded, how he acted, as a kid, it just was like, well, yeah, that's how it is because that's how it is. There was no question. So,
absolutely.
You say what you want about episode 1, about, with all due respect, your character, or about George Lucas. He got it right. He got it right with me, and he got it right with millions of other people, because there are millions of other people, mine and Matt's age, who concur with the same thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's all by design. George is really a futurist when it comes to how he thinks about putting things up and putting things together. Even if you think about, the first trilogy, there was stuff that was never done in movies before. ILM was created because he needed a special effects department for A New Hope. So he made one. And now you can't think about movies without thinking about ILM, without thinking about a company or a group that does special effects. And all the visual effects stuff has inspired tons of other companies, but George was kind of the first person to do that. George was the first person to think about that. George was the first person to think of a trilogy of movies and have them come out in succession, really. George was the first person to think about licensing and toys and dolls and t-shirts and all that kind of stuff. So he's really kind of a visionary when it comes to this. And it's always funny to me when people criticize George because, they don't realize that the reason why they can critique him is because he exists. All the things that he did and everything that everyone expects, they expect it because he did it first. So that's always interesting to me when people talk about not just Star Wars, but when they talk about visual effects in general in relationship to his work and what he does, and filmmaking in general in relationship to his work.
I mean, cinema owes a debt to George Lucas almost, and not just for creating these films, but like you just said, ILM, Skywalker Sound, things like that. I mean, without George pushing these boundaries and even the technological and visual effects in the prequels, and then moving on to Attack of the Clones, shooting on digital, the first film to do that, I believe.
First movie shot on digital.
That's it. I mean, George has been there. He's been pushing it. So, in decades to come, when we look back at all this and look back at George, people, all of this silliness about, George ruined my childhood, blah, blah, will be washed, we certainly hope will be washed away when people realise just actually what, if they don't already know, what George gave us to filmmaking. And Like,
Yeah.
just the character of Jar Jar Binks himself, before Gollum and before Caesar from Planet of the Apes, these are held up as the mocap performances. We got Jar Jar Binks, and I remember, I remember going 1999.
The OG.
You got these. This is number one. I remember going to the cinema to watch him, and at the time, it blended in perfectly, because obviously the question was, is this going to work? Are we going to believe that this character is on screen acting alongside Ewan McGregor, Liam Neeson, Jake Lloyd, Natalie, and everybody, Ian McDermott, of course, and everybody else? As a kid, to me, that alien on screen, the Gungan, was on screen. It didn't obviously feel like it was out of place, which is obviously credit to yourself and credit to George. And I showed it to my young daughter. She's coming up 4 years old. I showed her Jar Jar the Phantom Menace a couple of months ago. We actually have it recorded on an episode, and she loved it. Honestly, she was digging it. She was saying, "Oh, there's Jar Jar." And when he got her, separate the art from the artist, got his tongue obviously in the beams in the pod racer, she was loving it. And it, just like you say, that's what it's all about. And I mean, for me, that was something else. And I know a couple of our listeners have mentioned that their kids have been really, really, they love Jar Jar. I mean, for you, that must be pretty cool to hear, though.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it really not only solidifies the reasoning behind why George made the decision to create that character, but the collaboration of work that we all did as filmmakers, is something that stands the test of time. And, this whole idea of pioneering something, and working together as a group or working together as a team to make a thing happen. There was so much pride in the work that we did. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, there was so much positivity, energy, excitement, and pride in all of us coming together and going, this works. This is working. We are doing this. And when it's dismissed as easily as dismissed, people don't recognize that that's a testament to how good of a job we did as well. You can't even see the amount of work that went into making this thing, right? It's so believable and so fathomable and so realistic feeling that you feel the need to criticize it, just like you would criticize any other actor or any other action. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, even that is a testament to the work that we did. Unfortunately, you can't give people a film history course, just in everyday life. Mm-hmm. But if there wasn't a Jar Jar Binks, there wouldn't have been a Gollum. There wouldn't have been a Thanos.
Yeah,
sure.
The software that is still being used today that makes, the Incredible Hulk, that makes Thanos, that makes all of these movies, is the software that was written based on how I moved.
That's mad. Whoa. That's mental.
All of that code is based off of me. So there's no character out there who is CGI'd that has not been written based on the code that was me.
So now every time I see Gollum and every time I see Thanos, dude, I'm going to be thinking, mate, my boy Ahmed, he's there somewhere. Yeah. He's there somewhere.
I mean, I'm in there. I'm the ghost in the machine. Like, the reason why it works is because, we figured it out. And it was, and Rob Coleman, John Knoll, like all of those guys who collaborated to make Jar Jar, me, Rob, John Knoll, George Lucas, we all came together and could not have done it without each other. Right? So Jar Jar is not just me, and no visual effects or CGI character is just the performer. Right? There's a symbiotic relationship between the VFX people, the software people, what they now call virtual filmmakers, like the virtual cinematographer, the virtual cameraman, like all of those people, we all come together to make these characters believable, right? Unfortunately, the actor gets either the accolades or the criticism,
Mhm.
right? Or the director gets the accolades or the criticism, but it's between those two people, the actor or the director. But there's a whole slew of collaborators in order to make these characters live.
Of course.
And that needs to be recognized just as much as the actor.
No, you agree. It's a testament to those people as well. But it's also it's a hindrance that there's so many people behind the scenes who don't get recognised when things go well. And even if they don't, if people don't like what they're seeing, there's still a hell of a lot of people who work their backsides off to get that where it was. So I agree, and it's mental to hear that. Like you say, you are the blueprint. You are the say the ghost in the machine. You are the shadow looming over every CGI creation out there. And as soon as you said that, it hit me. I was like, God damn, that's true. And now you realise how much CGI has impacted modern filmmaking for better and worse. Yeah. And to know that you're behind that, it's incredible. But in terms of working with the co-stars, you mentioned all those names. You know, how did you get on day to day with them? Because obviously you're in your cat suit and your Jar Jar mask. How did you get on with them? And are there any like fun behind the scenes stories you can share?
Yeah, we got on really great. Everyone really came together and worked really well together. And, you know, in each movie, I had different relationships with different people. Mm-hmm. Of course, me and Natalie, both being New Yorkers, we kind of hit it off, and still do to this day. Like Natalie's one of my best friends. Oh. And Ewan and I were the same age. So he and I kind of clicked on that respect. But the person who I thought was the least likely person that I would identify with, who I had kind of the most fun with in Phantom Menace, was Liam Neeson.
How cool is that?
Wow.
We really connected. And it's just really ironic because, you know, he's much older than me, but, you know, from Ireland. There's his experience growing up and my experience growing up were, you know, quite different, but we had the same humor. Mm. So, and he had just come off of doing Victor Hugo's Les Miserables when he started on the Phantom Menace. So Liam was extremely serious, you know, every day working. He was just like really serious. And so I was just like, you know, we're kind of doing a fun movie, so let's just have fun. And I was desperately trying to make him laugh every day. If I could break Liam once in a scene, I had a successful day. Like that was my margin of whether or not I was doing a good job, is if Qui-Gon Jinn's mustache came flying off of his face, I did a good take.
What a barometer to a success, mate.
I was like, that's it. I did it.
That is the dream. That is the dream. I mean, what a story. Like experiences, man. And again, this is like what I can't get over is this is the same gentleman who went from Stomp, which is an accomplishment in itself. Yeah. You know, having a career like that is crazy in its own right, but going to effectively like hanging out with these people, you know, people that will be in books for many, many, many years. You know, that's a massive accomplishment. But you know, I mean, you've already kind of erred on this subject a little bit, but you've kind of spoken about the backlash. And obviously, you know, again, I'll reiterate, as a kid, you know, I wasn't aware of that. However, once I got a bit older and once I became a teenager, it became apparent that, you know, it was almost at the end of that era of, oh yeah, it was cool to make fun of the prequels or whatever, you know, but yeah, you know, but now, you know, times have changed, but obviously, you know, for those of you, you know, that keep up to date with yourself, you did have a tweet that went viral, which was incredibly thought provoking. Did you want to mention that at all, or would you rather stay away from that?
Yeah, that was kind of important. It was a very pivotal time because at first I wasn't going to tweet it out, mm-hmm. right? It had been a secret that I had held on to for 20 years. And, you know, being a man, and especially being a Black man in America, there's this facade that a lot of Black men have, which is just like, we're perpetually cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing can really break through that cool Black man exterior. And because of racism being so kind of everyday, ubiquitous, like every day there's a racial challenge,
Mm-hmm.
we develop, this thick skin in which where if there is a hardship, we have to appear as if it doesn't affect us.
Mm.
If we show any kind of vulnerability, and I think this is just men in general, like men in general have a hard time being vulnerable because vulnerability equals weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Then we feel as if we've lost something, So I had been reeling from the backlash for a very long time and, went through severe depression because of it. And so one night I felt like it was too much and I walked to the edge of the Brooklyn Bridge and I was going to jump off.
Wow.
So, and then, and I talk about this a lot in my one-man show.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a gust of wind came by and kind of woke me up.
Yeah.
And I walked back onto the bridge and then kind of in a daze, in this weird haze, just walked home. And, when I was thinking about it, I was just like, I can't believe I almost did that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the moment, when I got back to my apartment in Brooklyn, I was just like, I'm just not going to say anything about this. Nobody was around. Nobody saw me do it. Like, do over.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to restart. So, when I was this was like a couple years ago, I had this tweet, maybe like 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was walking across the bridge with my son. And I looked at my son and I was walking on the bridge and I was like, I almost didn't have you.
Man.
And my son is like the best thing in my life. Like I love that kid more than I love myself. And that realization of, I almost didn't have you.
Of course.
It just really hit me heavy. So I took this picture of me and him kind of looking at the spot where I almost jumped off the bridge. And it was just going to be for me,
Mm-hmm.
It was just going to be my like personal victory that I'm here, that I'm around. But for some reason, I felt like that was the right time to share that story.
Yeah.
And I had been writing about the whole Jar Jar experience from my perspective, from my point of view. And this is the part that I never wrote about.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part that I always just kind of like kept to myself because I didn't want to appear weak. But there's a thing when you're a writer, you have to write what scares you.
Mm.
And it really scared me. Right.
Yeah.
So I decided to write about it. And in order for me to be honest and write about it, I had to admit that it happened.
Of course.
I had to let it get out there. And so I tweeted it out. And, in my head, I felt like, nobody's going to really see this anyway. I was like, man, nobody really cares.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody's really going to care about it. So whatever, I'm going to put it out there. There it is. Done.
Step one type of thing.
Yeah. Step one. Now I can write about it. And then, the response from the tweet just went crazy. And I really didn't expect it, to be honest. Like I didn't really expect it, but it just kind of went nuts. And so I was just like, well, it's out now. Now I got to really talk about it. But once I did that, then the one-man show just came flying out.
I've got to say, obviously, huge respect to you for facing that darkness down, man, and finding the light at the end. Facing it up and look what you've got to show for it now. For you, how far have you come since you mentioned your son being the love of your life? And man, I hear that. But how far have you come personally since then? Sort of looking back and thinking where you were then to where you are now. Where are you, man?
I've come extremely far. I mean, there were there were years where I didn't even want to say Jar Jar Binks. Like just the words hurt me to my core. I got the amount of frustration and anger, trying to get people to realize that I did this thing. I was a part of this thing, and watching folks do what I did and have entire careers behind it would just really just get to me, and it wasn't because they weren't great, I was really jealous because I wanted to do that type of work as well. I wanted to continue what I started. And, ironically, no other Black man has ever done a CGI character in movies since me.
No,
that's a good point.
No way.
I was the first and last one.
No way. What?
And all this because people didn't like your portrayal of a character, well, let's just say that as all our listeners are intelligent, but a character Ahmed was asked to play. And then, rather than separate the art from the artist, people were just like, they had that symbiotic relationship. Ahmed is Jar Jar, Jar Jar's Ahmed, let's just go after him. And that's the problem with fandom nowadays, and I can't get my head around it. And, hearing your story there, it chokes me up because I can't put myself in those shoes to think that from playing a character, regardless of whether it's a beloved franchise or, something on the television or whatever it might be, to get that much vitriol, it's bothersome. And especially after hearing, like you say, the passion that went into creating the character from yourself, from John, from George, and Rob, and everyone. And then, obviously, the film drops 1, 2, and 3. And as we see, obviously, Jar Jar Binks has less to do in the 3 films in terms of screen time. And, people will say what they want about why. But you think, after the third one dropped and people are still angry and the stuff that they're saying, I can't fathom it, mate. So, it's a testament to yourself, obviously, for getting through that. But it is a shame that, people will go to those lengths when all you're doing is your job.
Yeah, and studios just didn't want to deal with the backlash. Like, studios didn't want to have to, clean up after that amount of vitriol, after that amount of fandom. And it's kind of happening now with, the new lot doing it, the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
You can see like all of them cats ready to walk away from it. It's just a harrowing experience. And for something that is supposed to be so joyful, it's incredible to see how much anger and disappointment some people can put out there and how loud that is. And I think we have to be fair and say that the negative is louder than the positive. I don't know if it's more negative than positive. I would venture to say that there's probably just as much positive. However, the negative gets more attention.
It's sexier, isn't it? It gets more clicks, it gets the attention, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of course.
And so when that happens, the people who are just doing the job, that's all you hear, I think because I went through what I went through, it's a lot easier for the new cats who are getting it to kind of recognize what it is and take steps in order to move away from it. Right. And Lucasfilm has figured that out as well. So Lucasfilm knows how to protect their people now because of what I went through. So, it's a lot easier for them. Like, John Boyega was getting static over there about, Finn and his portrayal, and, people were upset at him for some reason. But he did a very good job at shielding himself from it, by the same token, like he had stuff on his resume that I didn't have. You know what I'm saying? Like he was already in movies.
We already knew him. Like over here, he was in a few indie films. He was in like a cult classic called Attack the Block. Yeah, so but
he did
certainly
Attack the Block.
Yeah, which is a sick film. But like from like you're right, from an American perspective, you know, he was very much new kid on the block when he really Force Awakens came round.
Yeah, and you know, subsequently had the savvy enough and the people around him enough to go, okay, we're going to pivot to this way around it, you know. But I don't think anyone could make those type of speculative decisions if, you know, the backlash from Phantom Menace never happened.
Which is obviously there's a positive in there, but it came from a negative. It came from, you know, something that's a very dark time in your life, sadly. But, you know, in one way, because you went through that and, you know, you were a strong person, you came through it and you have your beautiful family. And that photo in itself, by the way, it's a beautiful photo. The one with you and your son on the bridge. It's gorgeous, you know, and it goes to show that, you know, because of that hardship, these people might just have it easier. Still doesn't make it right. And, you know, the fact that happens now and it's kind of like evolved into almost like a new fan backlash with access to social media, with access to YouTube instantly. Yeah. You know, you've got people like, bless her heart, Kelly Marie Tran, who portrayed Rose in The Last Jedi. You know, she had to leave social media because of it, which is, it's horrible. It doesn't matter what you think of the character or whatever, even the plot or the story of the film. If you're a decent person, you don't attack that actor. You know, like Matt said, the artist from the art, you know, you just have to separate it. But on, you know, without trying to move things along too much, you know, because I'm very aware that is a very emotional subject. But I can't help but think, Ahmed, I was watching you, mate, on stage in Chicago nearly a year ago today, mate. Yeah. And I know, you know what I'm going to say, right? So being on that celebration stage, you were brought out onto that celebration stage, in Chicago, Star Wars Celebration, and the people, like I was here in the UK watching it, I was streaming it, the people in that room cheering for you, mate.
They erupted.
Cheering for you. People from our generation, people that grew up with the prequels, people that grew up with the originals, people there cheering for Jar Jar and for you, for your portrayal. How did you feel after that? Because obviously coming from that dark place, coming from these crazy years, decades, to a place where you have thousands of people cheering you on, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, it was a bit overwhelming, to be honest. I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't been to a celebration since 1999. So I tried to do my best to avoid them all, you know, because I just didn't want to deal with it. And it was emotionally difficult. It really was. But, you know, like I said, sharing that story and sharing the tweet really helped me turn a corner and helped me really face how painful it was, you know, and embrace this new level of what healing is supposed to be. And I really wanted to go to Celebration for that reason. Like, this was where the healing kind of begins. You know, it began with writing the one-man show. But then I had to face that crowd. I had to face that audience and see if I was emotionally able enough to be in a room filled with Star Wars fans. You know what I'm saying? Because there are times when I just don't want to be in that room because it's just too hard. You know, it's really, really emotional for me. It's really painful. You know, Star Wars was the first movie I ever saw.
No way.
Back in the 70s. I was always a fan.
Wow.
And I've been a fan first. And, you know, being in movies and seeing what's behind the curtain kind of takes the shine away from it.
That's it.
But it didn't do that for me when I was in Phantom Menace. I loved it. Like I loved being there. And, growing up a poor kid in the Bronx and being on this film set is such a huge journey. And I was 24 years old at the time. So I was thinking, man, the sky's the limit. Like, this is just the beginning. I never thought of it as an end to anything. And that's what it became. It became this ending. So going to Celebration in Chicago, I was like, this has to be a new beginning. Mm-hmm. This can't be the end of the chapter. This has to be the start of chapter 2. And that's why I went. So I was pleasantly surprised, but it was very emotional for me. Like, if you look at like pictures or something from that, you can see my face, and I'm just kind of like in a daze a little bit.
I watched it yesterday, mate. I jumped on YouTube last night to watch it. Firstly, you're looking sharp on there, I've got to say. But
cheers, man. Cheers.
Andy Carboni, that man looked like he's about to burst out of his attire. He was so excited to be announcing you, mate.
Yeah.
And just honestly, watching it again, because like Lukey Boy, I streamed it and watched it. And the reaction was just wild, and it is like kind of like the excitement level came full circle. It took 20 years of that, like everything you just mentioned, and then getting to the level where you can go into that room and feel that. I mean, whatever people say about the fandom, that was a wonderful moment, and it was great for us to watch. And you've just said he didn't want it to be the big end; he wanted it to be the beginning. Disney Plus has just happened; it's just dropped in the UK. Little things coming out.
Oh, nice.
Jedi Temple Challenges. Now I hear someone is going to be hosting that.
Yeah, I'm hosting, and this is part of the healing as well. Like, I didn't want to come back to Star Wars, but like I said earlier, George was always just like, it's about the kids. It's about the kids. It's about the young people getting into it and having something for the rest of their lives. And I think Star Wars has lost something without George. And I think that something is the thing. It's not necessarily a thing that people believe in anymore, right? The faith aspect of Star Wars has kind of fallen behind the action aspect of Star Wars, right? And the thing that people don't really talk about very much in these movies is the Force. The Force is this now magical thing that only this certain line of family people can do, right? Back in the prequels and back in the first trilogy, the Force was the thing that was the universe. The Force was the thing that binds us all. And the Jedi have this special relationship with the Force, but the Force is out there. You know what I mean? The Force is something that we could all draw from in a way, whether physically as a Jedi or emotionally as someone who believes it's there. So this faith aspect of the Force has kind of gotten lost. It's the whole, like, everybody moved more towards the Han Solo side of the Star Wars stories and less from the Luke Skywalker side of the Star Wars stories, where, if you're a Joseph Campbell fan, the journey that you're following is the hero's journey.
Yep.
And we're not following that hero's journey so much anymore, which I think is the thing that made us all fans. So when Jedi Temple Challenge came around, I was like, I think this is a good way to go, because now you're going to be able to see how young Jedi become Jedi Knights. And as a kid, I always loved those like Shaw Brothers kung fu flicks where, the 36 chambers of Shaolin, where somebody would beg to be in Shaolin Temple and like stir soup for 3 years, and then next thing you know, they know kung fu. Right?
Just like that. Accurate, yeah.
I always love those things. It's just like all I'm doing is stirring soup. I don't understand. how come I don't know Kung Fu? And then the next thing you know, they're like flying over villages. Like, oh, how did I know? Stirring soup would give me all the Kung Fu knowledge I need.
I know what I'm going to be doing in quarantine.
Yeah, just stir some soup. You'll learn Kung Fu. But Jedi Temple Challenge made me feel like that. I was just like, oh man, I can be like, you know, one of those monks in Shaolin Temple who shows, you know, the new disciples how to learn Kung Fu.
How to stir that soup.
Wow. Which is so good because you're passing it on to, again, it's another generation. But this isn't, from my understanding, this is more of like a live action, like a quiz show, isn't it? It's not like like a game show. Sorry. Yes. Spot on. So has that filmed? Have you filmed the first season of that yet?
Yep. First season is done and in the can. And hopefully I actually have a call. As soon as I get off the phone with you guys, I'm going to have to call them, but hopefully it'll be out relatively soon. They wanted to do it for the summertime because kids are out of school, but now kids are out of school. So, I'm hoping they push it sooner.
Wow. Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be amazing? I can't wait to watch me.
The kid in me wants to see it,
man.
Yeah. And it's very much a kid show. So I really love the fact that, you know, during my toughest times, it was always the kids that lifted me up. Mm-hmm. You know, it was always the kids who were just like, I love Jar Jar. Always the kids who would laugh when Jar Jar would come on the screen. That would always make me feel good. That would always give me hope. So when they asked me to do this, I felt like I needed to give back to the kids.
Of course.
And this is kind of my way of giving back.
And again, it is poetic, you know, that this is what you're doing again. You're doing that purpose that Jar Jar had, you know, 20 years ago. You're doing that again on a different format to the next generation of Star Wars younglings. You know, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, Ahmed, we do have a cheeky question to ask you. There has been a lot of speculation and a lot of rumor on the interwebs lately in regards to a Disney Plus show, but not necessarily the Jedi Temple Challenge one. It's the, well, to be clear, there is basically a lot of rumors going around that you and Jar Jar Binks will be appearing in the Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus show. Do you know anything about that?
I keep hearing that too. No one has told me.
What are they getting on the phone?
No one has mentioned anything to me about it.
Yeah. If they did, if someone from Lucasfilm gave you a call, said, Ahmed, you know, we'd love you to come back as the character of Jar Jar, you know, in however big the role would be in a Kenobi or any other Lucasfilm, you know, series or film or something. Was that something you consider doing, like bringing the character back, or are you kind of happy with where he went? Because I was going to ask you about his canon end in Aftermath Empire's End, but our good friend Jamie Stangram and your good friend, he beat us to the punch.
Yeah.
But would you bring the character back though?
It really depends on what it is. Mm-hmm. Like I would really have to read the script and see what it is. I mean, I love Ewan McGregor so very much that he would be a big reason for me to say yes. Yeah. But I do have to check it out, and
of course
I'd really have to read it. You know, I'd really have to read it. But I'm definitely if it was right, yes, I would.
Nice. Right. Someone get writing then. Come on, script writers, come on.
Yeah, get him on.
Well, I think me and Luke, we would happily see the character back on screen because we've kind of gone on our own journey with Jar Jar. As kids, we liked him. As teens, you kind of, like you said, it's cool to hate on the prequels, even though we grew up with them, we like them. And now, as adults, you know, the character of Jar Jar, we accept what Jar Jar's all about, and in our own ways, and in how, like I say, whether it's seeing it through the eyes of my daughter or Luke, who was there, who was a youngling himself when the film came out, the character for ourselves has left like an indelible touch on the saga for us and growing up as well. So, firstly, thank you for that. But I mean, the last question from me, before we move on to anything else is, for you, how proud are you of Jar Jar and his involvement in the saga?
I'm incredibly proud of Jar Jar. I mean, not just for his story, but for the experience that I gained from playing Jar Jar, from the friends that I made with my fellow actors and the collaborators in the movie. And especially with George, I used to drive to work with George every once in a while, and I would sit behind George every day as he would work, and just kind of being a fly on the wall and being quiet. He really taught me a lot, and since then I've gotten my advanced degree in film, and I teach at a major university. I teach at University of Southern California.
Nice.
I teach a film course to actors, and if it wasn't for those experiences, if it wasn't for that, then I probably wouldn't be on the path that I am today. And I have to thank George for that. I have to thank Jar Jar for that. And I can always reach a very solid group of people like yourselves to share, the love of story with, share the love of this world and this universe with, and we always have something that connects us. So I appreciate that. And, I appreciate being a part of this huge, now even larger Star Wars family. Back in the day, you couldn't have a career in Star Wars, but thanks to the prequels, you can now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big thing. It's a big thing, and I'm just very proud to be a part of it.
Thank you very much, Ahmed Best. You're an absolute legend. And that's a thank you from us. That's a thank you from the community. And speaking of community, would you mind if we asked you a few short questions from some of our most loyal listeners? These are our patrons. They support the show financially, and they help keep the show going every week. Would you mind if we asked you some questions from them?
Sure.
All right, mate. Thank you so much. So, right, we got two questions that are basically the same. They've come from, firstly, Sean Hudson, who says, what are your acting plans for the future? And then Luke Summerfield also asked, what's next for you after Jedi Temple Challenge? Hopefully you get to be in season 2 of The Mandalorian and future movies. And he also thanked Ahmed for entertaining him as a child and now entertaining his children too. So we got another dad there thanking you.
Oh man, I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. Next for me, I'm always writing. The big thing is the one-man show, which I was supposed to bring to the Edinburgh Fringe this year, but then this whole thing got all crazy.
We're gonna come up and make you for a beer, man.
Yeah, man, that would have been fun. I'm hoping that we get this virus under control, and by next year, I can bring the one-man show to the Edinburgh Fringe. But that's the big deal, the one-man show, and also Two Black Dudes, which I do with one of my best friends, my brother, Mr. Jay Lee. He and I have a web show right now called Two Black Dudes, and we are writing season 3 of that, and hopefully we'll be doing that very soon as well. And then I'm directing a bunch of stuff that should be, it all really depends on when the world starts opening again. Cool. But as soon as that happens, then hopefully you'll see some stuff that I directed out there in the universe.
Sweet. Wow. Thank you, mate. We had another one from Matthew Bell. He said, apparently Jar Jar was intended to have a different role in the prequels, with a popular, rather far-fetched suggestion that he was an undercover Sith. But aside from that, he says, are you aware if there is any truth in any of this? Not necessarily the Sith bit, but more that Jar Jar was meant to have more of an evolution of his role, but it was, it deviated from what it should have been.
Well, there definitely would have been more to Jar Jar had not the backlash happened, I think, personally. I can't speak for George. but I think there would have definitely been more. But there were things, the interesting thing about that Sith theory is it picked up on a lot of the stuff that I was doing. I was doing a lot of like kind of undercover physicalities to bring a lot more depth and dimension to Jar Jar. And my background as a martial artist and as a mover definitely came into play with a lot of it. So, a lot of the martial arts influence of Jar Jar was definitely on purpose.
Tapped into the dark side, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, awesome. Up next, we got a question from Dylan Q, who says this first. He says, please let Ahmed know how much my sisters and I love him and Jar Jar. We got his merch every chance we had, always chose to be him in the playground and really loved his warmth and energy. He asks, what's the best thing about returning to the Star Wars galaxy now?
It's the kids. The best thing is the kids. I love the fact that when you're a kid, you can grow up with this mythology and it can be definitely a part of you. And there were just some days on Jedi Temple Challenge where the kids would show up and you would see them brighten up so much. And then this one kid came up to me and he said, this is a dream come true to be in this world. And it just brings you back to when you were a kid, Like I remember how I felt when I saw Star Wars, and I just love that feeling. So that's what excites me about being back with the kids.
Wow. What an answer. And just to add to that, our conversation we're having right now is proof in the pudding that worked with episode 1 with the prequels and myself. The fact that me and you are talking right now, we are proof of that. So yeah, thanks again.
Cheers. Thank you.
And we've got one last one from a local boy, George Constantinou. He said, of course, besides Jar Jar Binks, who is your favourite Star Wars character?
Who is my favorite? That's a tough question. When I was growing up, I wanted to be Han Solo. That was my dude. So, definitely Han Solo. But, I think it's between Han Solo and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Because what Ewan McGregor brought to Obi-Wan, he brought a kind of like snarky, kind of cool swag to Obi-Wan that I really enjoyed. I really, really enjoyed that. So it's Obi-Wan Kenobi and probably between Obi-Wan and Han Solo.
It's a good answer, mate. And there's one last question from a guy called Matt Hudson. I know him quite well. It's me. I just wanted to know what, out of the 9 films, 10 films, however many there are now, we do a show. I can't remember how many films there are, but which is your favourite? Do you have a favourite Star Wars film, or is it the first one you saw, or is any of the new ones, or the ones that you were in kind of your favourite?
I do. The Empire Strikes Back is probably my favorite film of all time.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
My favorite Star Wars film. And I just feel like The Empire Strikes Back is the perfect movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really is.
It's gold, isn't it? It is absolute gold. And just like you, Ahmed Best, you are absolute Star Wars gold. Thank you so much for being on the show, coming on the podcast, answering all our questions and discussing funny things, and things that we can definitely learn from as fandom. That's something I really want to take away from here. I think there's a lot of people can learn from your amazing experience because of what you've been through and what you were very, very honest about and said in a lovely way. So thank you so much for coming and spending your time with us, mate.
Thank you as well. I really appreciate everybody who listens to the program and everyone who finds the joy in the stuff that we try to do. All we out here doing is we're doing our jobs, but if we can give you something that not only entertain but believe in, then we've done what we were supposed to do.
Legend.
Tell you something, man. You've made this man's evening, and I know you've made that man over there, Luke Bly's evening as well. So, mate, again, just echoing Luke, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for talking Star Wars. Thank you for being honest with us. And yeah, thanks for everything you've given to the community. And keep on keeping on.
Cheers, man. Will do. Thank you, guys.